At the beginning of the movie, a group of friends is discussing finding a new hangout spot, when suddenly, Iqbal hears a voice calling his name. Curious, he gets up and starts walking toward the source. Nurl asks where he's going, but he ignores her and heads to the stairs, where he spots his mother. Confused, he follows her downstairs, looking around for her, and we see her pass behind him, softly singing a song. Iqbal walks toward the elevator, and as the doors open, his mother is there, taking a flashlight out of her bag, saying it belonged to his father. She pulls out another one, saying, "This is yours," and then lights up a third flashlight, telling him to take it. Iqbal reaches out to grab it, but his mother approaches and her face transforms demonic, startling him. The next moment, she appears normal again, telling him she's been looking for him everywhere.
Comment. Subscribe to Recapss Horror.
Next, Iqbal is traveling with his family when their car breaks down along the way. His dad, Norman, and his mom, Dina, step out to check the problem, but after inspecting it, Norman tells her that everything seems fine and that thing is starting to disturb them. Dina says they've already passed this route twice, to which Norman tells her to put her phone away and use her third eye. As Iqbal steps out of the car, he notices several shadowy entities wandering in the forest. But just then, his father hands him a bag. He gives the bag to Dina, who sits down and begins taking flashlights out of it in the exact same way Iqbal had seen in his vision. She then takes out a third torch, switches it on, and hands it to Iqbal, who fearfully grabs the flashlight, but turns to Norman and tells him that he doesn't want anything to happen to their mom. He says he doesn't know how to explain, but Norman interrupts, asking what's wrong with him, and then he goes to Dina and says that the sooner they get there, the sooner they can finish and leave. They decide to cross the dense forest on foot, and Dina tells Iqbal not to walk alone. A little further on, they come across some fruits from which blood is oozing. They finally reach a house, and Norman rings the bell, but no one answers. Dina tells Iqbal not to be afraid, saying the things they see can't harm them, and calls this ability a special gift from God. Iqbal admits he's still scared, to which she advises him to be patient until he gains more knowledge. Just then, the door swings open wide by itself, and without wasting any time, they all enter the house. Norman tells Yaya to stay put, as they have work to do. During this, Iqbal notices a woman upstairs, who tells Dina that she didn't think she would come. As they enter the room, they see a woman's dead body on the bed, and a man levitating just above her. Dina spots Zura on the floor, who says, "At last, you have arrived in our den." Dana identifies the presence as a jinn called Al-Hinu, but it suddenly attacks Norman, knocking him unconscious. The entity then declares that they cannot touch Zura, as she belongs to them now. Dina begins to recite prayers, forcing the levitating man to slowly descend, but the jinn suddenly lunges at Iqbal. Dina turns to the creature, and Iqbal says that she is not Al-Hinu. Dina urges him to use his abilities, but the jinn hisses that Iqbal can die. Dina grabs the entity by the head, warning it not to touch her son, before hurling it away. Zura suddenly returns to normal, crying for help, and after approaching Dina, she collapses onto her. Thinking the jinn has left her, Dina is caught off guard when a grotesque face appears at the back of Zura's head and attacks Iqbal. Dina intervenes, but the jinn forces its way into her mouth, possessing her. As Dina collapses, Norman rushes to her side and tells Iqbal to quickly get the jar. Iqbal returns with the jar, and Norman draws the jinn out of Dina and traps it inside the jar. Iqbal quickly seals it shut, and Dina weakly says that the Al-Gilin jinn tricked her. She says it wanted to kill Iqbal, and with those words, she dies. The next day, after Dina's burial, Norman asks Iqbal if he likes watching them play, and Iqbal replies that he would prefer it if he could be like them. He then tells his father that he doesn't want to see those things anymore or continue working, questioning what the point of his abilities is if he couldn't even save his own mother. To which Norman tells him that it's not his fault she died, and reminds him that they cannot fight God's plan. Later, Norman meets with Jamil and tells him that his wife has passed away. Surprised, Jamil asks why he didn't say anything, and when Norman stays silent, Jamil remarks that he's known them for 5 years, yet he is telling him about her death as if it's nothing. Jamil tries to give him some money for the funeral, but Norman refuses, to which Jamil insists he take it, saying there's always a lot to handle when someone dies, but adds that he will need his help with something for the next 2 weeks. Later, Norman asks Jamil if Iqbal can come along, and Jamil agrees, but when Norman asks about Nurl, Jamil's daughter, he doesn't even recognize her, and says she can just go back to her own house. Jamil takes them to his greenhouse, where he keeps very rare plants. He proudly shows them his first exotic specimens, Titan arums, which he personally carried from Sumatra with his own hands. He explains to Norman that they bloom only once every 8 years, and only for a single day. He has seen them bloom just once in his life, and he can't afford to miss it again. But before that, they need to be fed. Jamil takes Norman inside, and during this, Iqbal hears someone gasping from one of the plants. Meanwhile, Jamil tells Norman to wait until the food rots before topping it up. Suddenly, Norman notices a talisman pasted on a door, but Jamil quickly says that the room is empty and there's no need to enter. Norman tells Iqbal he's not allowed to enter the greenhouse and that his work will be done in 2 weeks, after which they can forget about the place. Later, Nurl's uncle, Rahim, is bullying her friends when she steps in to confront him. He tells her to stay out of it, and Iqbal suggests they just leave. But Rahim suddenly attacks him, and when Nurl warns him not to mess with her friends, Rahim lets go of Iqbal, but comments that she will be all grown up very soon, and then he will teach her how to dress like a woman and how to take care of a man. Later, Iqbal takes his friends and sister to the greenhouse, where Nurl asks him where he got the keys, and he explains that his dad is looking after the place, while her father is away in Sumatra for 2 weeks. They enter a room filled with insects to feed the blood flower, and Ali comments that Nurl's dad takes his hobby seriously, to which Nurl says it's his business and profitable, though he never shares with them. Bob adds that his mom says Jamil is generous with his second wife, upsetting Nurl, who walks away. Iqbal follows, telling her that Bob didn't mean it, but she says people always talk about her family like that. She then asks him about the talisman, and at that moment, Ali steps out and asks what they think might be inside the room. Nurl asks for the keys, but as Iqbal takes them out, Ali snatches them and tries to unlock the door, yet none of the keys fit, so he throws the keys. Iqbal picks up the keys and suggests they leave, but Bob refuses, calling him a coward. Ali then removes the talisman and throws it down, and he and Bob begin trampling on it, mocking that there's nothing to be afraid of. But suddenly, the door swings open, and hearing a demonic growl, Ali and Bob run in fear. Scared, Iqbal cautiously steps into the room, and they notice a nail in the wall, from which blood appears to be seeping. He wonders if it's mucus or blood, but Nurl says she only sees a nail. Iqbal mutters that something isn't right here and starts to leave, but then he hears a strange noise, and to his horror, he spots an eerie entity under a light. He tells Nurl to be careful, and says they need to leave immediately. That night, Iqbal is watching a video of his mother on his phone when he hears a strange noise, and he notices a demonic entity lurking in the bathroom. He cautiously steps into the bathroom, when suddenly, the shower turns on, and the crying continues from behind the curtain. But when he pulls it back, no one is there. Confused, he steps away and glances around, only to realize the cries are coming from the mirror. Terrified, he approaches the mirror and wipes away the condensation, only to suddenly jolt awake. But as he turns and sits up, there's a demonic entity lying right beside him. Heart pounding, he begins to recite prayers, and the entity vanishes into thin air. Iqbal steps out and presses the elevator button, but then he hears a noise from the side, and as he turns, he is horrified to see Nurl's grandmother quietly walking away. He rushes to the graveyard and plays a video of his mother on his phone to calm himself down. Later, Norman finds him sleeping under a tree and wakes him, asking what happened the night before. But Master tells Norman not to pressure him, and to give him some time. Iqbal says he just wants to be normal, but Norman tells the Master they can't leave him like this and that they have to seal his abilities. Next, we see the Master sealing Iqbal's abilities, and afterward, he gives Norman a verse to undo it if he ever needs to. Later, Anna sees Popo worshipping and chanting Nurl's name, and then she warns Anna that no one must know Nurl is a girl. Anna says she can't force her to be someone she's not, and goes inside. But as Popo follows, she hears the elevator bell ring. Intrigued, she walks over to check and watches as the elevator doors open and close on their own. And then, after a while, a girl and a terrifying entity appear inside the elevator. Later, while Iqbal and his family are going for a movie, Popo leans in close to him and whispers that they will be damned, leaving him confused. She then walks into her house in a trance-like state, and when Iqbal glances inside, he sees her standing on the balcony. Just then, Norman calls out to him, and as Iqbal turns, Popo slowly climbs onto the parapet and jumps down from there. When Iqbal comes downstairs, he is shocked to see Popo's lifeless body lying there, but to his horror, he spots the entity licking her blood from the ground. Later, at the cinema hall, someone sits in the seat next to Iqbal, and when he looks over, he realizes it's a ghost, prompting him to flee in terror. Later that night, the greenhouse door creaks open on its own, and Rahim steps inside. Norman is there as well, but with his headphones on, he remains unaware of Rahim's presence. Meanwhile, Iqbal wakes up to the sound of something from the floor above, but then he hears a woman crying. On the other hand, Rahim is attacked and killed by the entity, and moments later, a woman's ghost appears at the scene. The next day, the kids admit they haven't been sleeping well, and Nurl asks if they felt something strange since going up there. Bob says a woman's weeping keeps him up at night, but Nurl interrupts, insisting they look for Ali. Iqbal says they should put the talisman back, but Bob refuses, telling them to risk their own lives without him. Later, at Popo's funeral, Iqbal hears her whispering, "We will be damned." Confused, he leans in to hear more clearly, when she suddenly turns to him and repeats it. And when Anna asks if he's okay, he notices the ghosts of Ali and Bob standing behind her. He and Nurl return to the greenhouse and begin searching for the talisman. Iqbal steps into a room where the entity is present, and blood is still oozing down the wall. Suddenly, the talisman slides across the floor toward his feet, and as he bends down to pick it up, it slips away. As he looks up, the entity tries to reach him, startling him, and just then, Nurl's scream pierces the air. Iqbal rushes out to her and is horrified to find Ali's lifeless body on the ground. Later, Norman tells Sergeant Zihan that he discovered the body while watering the plants in the morning. Zihan asks if anyone else has access to the place, and Norman replies no one, although he isn't completely sure. Zihan then asks Iqbal if Ali is his friend, and Iqbal nods. Yaya says they were here yesterday, but Norman quickly tells her not to make things up. Norman asks Iqbal why Ali was there, to which he turns and says he doesn't know how Ali got in on his own, but admits that yesterday he did take them there. He adds that Ali and Bob tore off the talisman, and he felt as if something was released from it. Norman says his abilities have been sealed, to which Iqbal responds that he can no longer tell what's real and what's not. Norman stops him and argues that anyone can buy a talisman and paste it, asking why he is so stubborn, to which Iqbal says he knew he wouldn't understand, explaining there's so much he can't tell him, and adds that you don't have what I and my mother have. That night, Iqbal is watching a video of his mother on his phone when the sound of a woman's cries once again catches his attention. Frustrated, he throws something at the ceiling, but the cries only grow louder and louder. Iqbal steps into Nurl's house, calling her name, but he doesn't notice the lifeless Popo passing by silently behind him. Then, in a trance-like state, he drifts into the dimly lit kitchen and sits in a chair. Popo sets a plate of steaming food in front of him, and without wasting any time, he begins to eat. But after taking a few bites, something feels wrong. He reaches into his mouth, pulls out a mangled, sinewy lump, and freezes. Realizing it's human flesh, he turns and freezes in terror, seeing Popo standing there, hacking into her own stomach with a chopper, causing her intestines to spill out, and she begins laughing maniacally, the sound echoing through the room. Suddenly, Iqbal hears a disturbing noise, and to his horror, he sees Nurl hunched over, devouring a baby. Stunned and trembling, he gets up and leaves, revealing the plate piled with raw, bloody flesh. The next day, Iqbal confides that he can see entities from other dimensions, something his mother always called a gift, though he has no idea what to do with it. Nurl asks if that makes him a superhero, but he says this isn't a joke and believes he can see when people are going to die, and last night he saw her. Nurl says that if anything happens to her, he must save her. Meanwhile, Norman goes to the greenhouse to feed the plants when Bob enters there in a trance-like state. He goes into the room where the entity resides, and without warning, it grabs him and drags him into the shadows. Yaya hears his scream from inside and tries to open the door, but it's locked. Norman stops her abruptly, warning her not to enter that room. And as he takes her away, Bob's lifeless body is hurled out from the darkness. The next day, Zihan discovers Bob's lifeless body in the room, and suddenly, a noise from outside catches her attention. She hurries out, muttering that it was really so hard to move the pot, only for everyone to freeze in shock when they uncover a human jawbone buried in the soil. Meanwhile, Yaya walks into Iqbal's room, saying Dad told her to cover her face when she's scared, but she can still hear. Iqbal asks, "Hear what?" And she replies, "That sound, ever since we went upstairs." As they are heading upstairs, Anna asks Iqbal where his father is, and he replies that he's at the police station. Anna takes them to her house, gives them food, and tells Nurl she's heading off to work. Moments later, Yaya spots a ghost in the house, and Nurl whispers it's her sister. But Iqbal insists it's not. A sinister entity looms up behind the ghost and pulls her inside itself. Iqbal tries to stop it, only to remember his abilities are sealed. The entity hurls him aside, then attacks Nurl, pinning her to the table. It then spits a thick, slimy liquid into her mouth, rendering her unconscious. The next day, Iqbal returns to the greenhouse and is horrified to see the flower oozing blood. He steps back in fear, quickly pulling out his phone to take pictures, but in the photos, there's no sign of blood. He then enters the room and confronts the entity, asking what it is and what it wants, but receives no response. He then sits under the same tree, watching his mother's video and asking for forgiveness, saying he couldn't save her. Just then, the video glitches, and Dina says there's nothing to forgive, as he couldn't have stopped it. She tells him she's gone, but she will always love him for who he is, and that he doesn't need to be like anyone else. The next day, Iqbal meets Master, who tells him that these are God's tests. Iqbal says, but he sealed his abilities, to which Master says it seems like only his healing powers were sealed. He tells him that his abilities are extraordinary, a gift from God to help others. At the police station, Zehen tells Norman they found Rahman's phone and traces of his blood at the greenhouse, but Norman insists that's impossible. Ravi accuses him of using the dead boys to deal drugs and questions him about Bob's death. Norman finds the talisman, claiming it's the cause of everything, and insists he must save his children, and saying they're in danger, he quickly leaves. Meanwhile, Iqbal and Yaya hear disturbing sounds, but it is only then that Norman returns home, and Iqbal tells him that Nurl is in danger. They rush to Nurl's apartment, and to their shock, they find a possessed Nurl forcefully feeding her mother while saying she wants her father. Norman and Iqbal begin reciting prayers, drawing Nurl's attention toward them. Norman asks for her and her mother's names, but Nurl spits on him before saying, Jamil bin Ahmad. As she steps down from the bed, Iqbal observes her blisters, teeth grinding, and the fact that she can only recall her father's name, he says. It's a demonic possession. Iqbal then grabs her while reciting prayers, and Norman places his hand on her head, continuing the prayers until she temporarily calms down. Norman warns that if they don't heal her now, this thing will take their children. Just then, the doorbell rings, and Anna remembers that the police wanted to question her. Norman quickly tells her they must not know he's there, and that he'll explain everything later. After she leaves, Norman tells Iqbal that he met with the master earlier, and he told him everything. He then apologizes, admitting, I was the stubborn one. Meanwhile, Zahan asks whose room it is, and Anna replies, my eldest, Farah, who went missing 8 years ago. Zihan asks if she filed a police report, and Anna says yes, but nothing has come of it. Just then, Ravi tells Zihan that they have to move urgently. He takes her to the spot where they found Rahim's dead body and suspects that Norman might have killed him and dumped him there. Anna returns, saying she cannot lose another child, but at that moment, Nurl says, "I am not Nurl." Norman tells her she can speak to him and asks who she is, and Nurl replies, "I am Farah." Norman warns her not to try and fool them, but she insists she doesn't want to talk to him. She wants to talk to her father. Suddenly, she attacks Norman before throwing him to the ground, and when Iqbal tries to restrain her, she hurls him down as well. She then leaps off the bed, slips underneath it, and begins dragging Iqbal under. Anna intervenes, grabbing Iqbal's legs, and after a struggle, manages to pull him out. By then, Norman is back on his feet, reciting prayers as Nurl emerges from under the bed. She suddenly lunges at him, trying to strangle him, but he continues chanting without fear. After a while, leaning close, she whispers, "We will be damned," before bursting into maniacal laughter. After a tense struggle, Norman manages to place his hand on her head and continues reciting prayers. Iqbal quickly rushes to help him, and together they overpower her until she collapses unconscious. Anna rushes to her side, assuring Nurl she is there for her, and Nurl, trembling, begs Iqbal to help her. Later, Iqbal says this is a Hantu Raya, and Norman asks Anna if anyone in her family has ever kept one. Iqbal explains that a Hantu Raya needs a master, and suggests that maybe Jamil could help, as she keeps asking for him. Suddenly, Nurl begins shaking violently, and Norman starts reciting prayers. Iqbal urges him to ask her who its master is, but before Norman can, her body convulses more violently, and she slowly rises to her feet. She looks at Iqbal and taunts, asking if he has lost his abilities, and Norman warns her not to mess with his son. Then, to their horror, she spreads her legs and gives birth to a grotesque creature. As it slips away, Nurl collapses and convulses again, before suddenly getting up and leaping out of bed. Norman rushes out, only to find Yaya missing. Iqbal heads to the kitchen to search for her and finds her hiding there, but she's not alone. Suddenly, Nurl leaps at Iqbal, but Norman intervenes, taking the blow himself. Anna and Iqbal rush to his side, and soon after, they see Nurl holding Yaya with a knife in her hand. With no other option, Norman places his hand on Iqbal's head and recites a sacred verse to unseal his abilities. As Iqbal rises, Nurl sets Yaya down, and the girl quickly runs to her father. Anna takes them away to safety, while Nurl drops the knife to the floor. She then attacks him, taunting, having fun. Iqbal tells the demon to release her and take him instead, saying she is dying soon and won't be of much use. But the demon asks, "What's so special about you?" In response, Iqbal places his hand on her head and begins reciting powerful prayers. The verses weaken the demon, and with a surge of strength, Iqbal pulls it out from her mouth and begins consuming it. After a fierce struggle, he finally manages to free Nurl, and they both collapse to the ground, one after the other. Next, we see a possessed Iqbal in the greenhouse, and shortly after, Norman arrives, searching for him. Iqbal is desperately digging into the wall when he suddenly stops, finding something inside. As he pulls it out, Norman tells the demon to get out of his son, but the demon turns to him, tosses the object aside, and says, "If I snap my fingers, this kid dies." Norman begins reciting prayers as he steps forward, but the demon lunges at him, knocking him to the floor. As Norman struggles to fight back, the demon says, "Don't make wild accusations, and that I just want to take care of them." Then it adds, "Your son is special, not you, saying you stood by and watched Dina die, just like you'll watch Iqbal die because you're weak." The words cut deep, and Norman, consumed by rage, starts beating Iqbal. But the demon only laughs, fueling Norman's fury and driving him to hit harder and harder. Meanwhile, in the other realm, Dina approaches Iqbal, but he can see it's the demon in disguise. He warns it to stay away, saying, "My mother is dead, and I know what you are." He then begins reciting prayers, causing the demon to retreat step by step. Iqbal then wakes up, and Norman apologizes, saying he only wanted to help, to which Iqbal looks at him and says, "Don't be afraid," before embracing him. During this, Anna picks up the object the demon had pulled from inside the wall, and finds a fetus inside. Meanwhile, Jamil returns to the greenhouse, only to be shocked at the sight of human remains beneath the plant. He turns to flee, but the door slams shut on its own. Suddenly, an unseen force knocks him to the ground and begins dragging him across the floor. It pulls him into the room and releases him, and before he can react, the light bulb above him begins to glow brighter. A flashback reveals that 8 years ago, Jamil got Farah pregnant, and in a desperate attempt to cover it up, he is trying to abort the baby himself. Popo pleads with him to take her to the hospital before she dies, but he refuses, warning that if she tells anyone, Anna and Nurl will suffer. Suddenly, Farah sits up and the demon inside her speaks, telling Jamil she will not die. When Jamil asks who it is, the demon replies, "I came here with your beloved plant from Sumatra. I had no master back then, but when Farah came to tend to your plant, I chose her, and as long as I am inside her, I will not let her die." Furious, Jamil declares, "I am Farah's father." He then grabs a machete and repeatedly slashes her in the stomach, his rage blinding him, and in a frenzy, he butchers his own daughter in a brutal, merciless attack. He gives Farah's body parts to Rahim to bury them under the plant, saying, "This is between us as a family, and I will give you some money later." After this, he throws the fetus into the wall and tells Popo, "Don't ever remove this paper, or else they will be damned." Jamil explains he didn't mean to, but Anna says, "You're worse than an animal." She asks, "Is this your work?" and throws it at him. Then, in a fit of rage, she starts hitting him, but Norman pulls her back, trying to calm her down, and just then, the demon appears, grabs Jamil, and drags him into the shadows. Jamil finds himself in another realm, where he is confronted by Farah, saying, "Luckily, you once taught me how to please and satisfy a man," she adds. "You taught me all kinds of things, but what a pity I died." She continues that your knife was always dull, but my weapon is vicious. Suddenly, she vanishes, and the demon appears and lifts him into the air. The demon pricks him with its nails before hurling him aside. It proceeds to stab him repeatedly and brutally, and then it drags him away until they both disappear. Iqbal then comes face to face with the demon and says they need to seal it inside, but Norman replies, "Not seal it. We need to close the portal." Norman holds Iqbal's hand, encouraging him to pray, then slowly lets go as Iqbal continues. His prayers take effect, and the demon starts to retreat, shrinking away until it finally vanishes, and as the demon disappears, the portal closes behind it. A few days later, Iqbal confides that he now understands he's not meant to be normal, and, with God's guidance, will do what's needed. They then pour water on Diana's grave, but as they leave, Yahya sees spirits approaching them and asks who they are, to which Iqbal answers, "You'll find out soon." At the end, the blood flower is shown blooming, and the movie ends here.